गोपाल तू जॉईन कधी करली होतं ना?
ମୁଁ କହିପାରିବି କୋଉଥିରେ ଜଏନ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ମୁଁ କହିପାରିବି।
ତମର ମ୍ୟୁଟ କର ଆগে, ଶୁଭୁଛି ତମ କଥା। ମ୍ୟୁଟ କର।
Hello, may I request our host to kindly unmute our chief speaker and chief guest. Professor Anita Bose Madam has already joined. I request our host to please unmute our chief guest. I request our host and our co-host to kindly unmute our chief guest, Madam Professor Anita
She
Bose.
has been given the co-host permission. She can unmute.
All right, thank you. Professor Madam Anita Bose Madam, kindly unmute yourself. You may unmute at about 7 o'clock also. Since the memorial lecture will start at 7, you may kindly unmute at 7 o'clock. At 7 p.m., 1900 hours, Indian Standard Time. In the meantime, may I request our co-hosts to be ready to keep all others in mute conditions, both video and audio, so that peace and silence are maintained. May I also request our host to allow 5 of us to be co-host and keep our audio and video to be unmute by ourselves. This is a request for our host. We will start at exactly 7 p.m. 1900 hours Indian Standard Time. We will wait for our esteemed participants to join. Our esteemed chief guest has already joined, but we'll wait for our esteemed participants also to join by 7 o'clock, 1900 hours Indian Standard Time. Our girls team, girls students from Ravensa Collegiate School, and the boy students from our schools, those who will pay tributes, grateful tributes to Netaji and to INA martyrs through the INA war song, Kadam Kadam Badhaya Ja, may also be ready at about 7:05 p.m. You will be invited to do the song rendition.
एक टिक्की ना
Can you hear me? Warte, was gehört?
Now we can hear you.
Ja, okay, gut.
Kannst du einmal ein bisschen lauter stellen?
Ja, das ist die Frage. Ja, okay, gut.
Jetzt? Check again with him on the language.
Okay, danke dir. Danke. Okay.
Good evening, madam. Jai Hind.
Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Namaskar. Jai Hind, madam. Very kind of you to have obliged us by joining today's memorial lecture, and very thoughtful of you to have joined little early, though we are waiting for our participants to join. We will start exactly at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We are
Yeah,
aware.
I will also be off for just a minute. I forgot something. I'll be right
Yes.
back.
Sure, madam. We have 2 more minutes to start.
Yeah.
May I
I
request?
just had to get some napkins because my nose is running.
Ma'am, we are extremely grateful despite your flu and cold health condition. You have agreed to address our alumni. We will try to be part of you. We will try to help and support you with your memorial lecture, which you will be able to conclude at your free will, but definitely we will not take more than 15 minutes from you.
Okay.
May I request our host and co-host to keep all our participants in mute conditions so that peace and silence is maintained. And in the beginning, we will request our students from the Ravenshaw Collegiate School to pay grateful tributes to Netaji and to INA martyrs through the song rendition of INA war song, Kadam Kadam Badhaye Ja. Ma'am, we will formally take your permission to start today's webinar and your memorial lecture.
Please do.
Thank you, madam. I welcome all our participants. On behalf of all our participants, alumni of both the alma
Recording in
maters of
progress.
Netaji, that is Ravenshaw Collegiate School and Stewart School, Cuttack, I extend a very hearty welcome to daughter, Professor Anita Bose Pfaff, with Shraddha and Saman, and with INS greetings and salutations. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Ma'am, before we start the webinar and memorial lecture, as part of our celebration of Netaji's Martyrdom Day, Shahid Divas, we would request our students from Ravenshaw Collegiate School, Susri Aisha Das, Class 7 student Susri Shruti Shuhani Das, Class 10th student, and Master Avigyan Mahapatra, Class 11 student, to pay tributes with the INA song Kadam Kadam Badhai Ja. May we request Shruti Shuhani Das and team to render INA war song, please. Over to you, Shruti Shuhani Das. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Please continue. Please start.
कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, तू कौम पे लुटाए जा। कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, तू कौम पे लुटाए जा। शेर हिंद आग बनने से फिर भी तो लगा, उड़ाती दुश्मनों का सर जो से वतन बढ़ाए जा। तू शेर हिंद आग बनने से फिर भी तो लगा, उड़ाती दुश्मनों का सर जो से वतन बढ़ाए जा। कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, तू कौम पे लुटाए जा।
साइड कर दिया।
चलो दिल पुकार के कमरे संभाल के, लाल किले पे गाड़ के लहराए जा लहराए जा। चलो दिल पुकार के कमरे संभाल के, लाल किले पे गाड़ के लहराए जा लहराए जा। कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, तू कौम पे लुटाए जा। कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, तू कौम पे लुटाए जा।
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha Das.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Shruti Shwani Das. And thank you, Abhigyan Mahapatra, for rendering INA war song and for paying grateful tributes to Netaji and INA martyrs on our behalf. Madam, you will be happy to know, since the 14th of August, both the school alumni have been celebrating Netaji's Martyrdom Day in various modes. On 16th of August, on this Sunday, last Sunday evening, INA leaders Colonel Prem Kumar Sehgal and Rani Jhansi Regiment Commander Captain Lakshmi Sehgal's daughter, Madam Shubhashini Sehgal, delivered INA Martyrs Memorial Lecture for all our students. And today, on the 18th of August, on the Martyrdom Day of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, our school students, our alumni, our old students have submitted appeals in writing to the President of India and to the Prime Minister of India, making 3 appeals. Ma'am, I will read out these 3 appeals. You will be very happy to know we are in support of you and we are seeking your support as well. The first appeal is to allow us to celebrate 18th of August every year as the Martyrdom Day of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Number two, to bring back the mortal remains of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose kept in the Renkoji Temple at Tokyo with special state honor, and to perform the last rite with special state honor in India. And the third appeal, ma'am, for which we require your support as well, to help support us in establishing INA Martyrs Memorial in Netaji's alma mater at Cuttack, the Ravenshaw Collegiate School and the Stuart School at Cuttack. Ma'am, with this welcome address and with this context, we would like to invite you and welcome you heartily for delivering your memorial lecture, Shahid Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Memorial Lecture, to our students, to our teachers, and to all the youths who have joined us through the Zoom platform as well as YouTube live streaming. Our students from various parts of the world, our students from various educational institutions and university abroad and inside the country have joined. Now, madam, we hand it over to you for your kind delivery of memorial lecture. Over to you, madam. Jai Hind, once again.
Jai Hind to all of you. Jai Hind to Mr. Sismal. Jai Hind to the faculty and administration, the alumni, and the students of Ravenshaw Collegiate College. Thank you very much for inviting me on this occasion to celebrate my father's Martyr Day and to remember him on this very important day. After all, it is 81 years that have passed since he passed away. And thank you very much for supporting my effort to have his remains repatriated after all these many years. As you know, I have filed a petition to the Supreme Court to get this done. So during that period, I personally do not want to talk about that in any greater detail, but thank you for your support in this matter. When we think of the momentous events and decisions that Netaji has taken throughout his life, if I were in a classroom situation and were to ask you what you think was important, I think you might be coming up with all sorts of things. Since we're not in a classroom situation, I sort of give you a list which hopefully is comprehensive enough to include all the things that you might have said. So let me start as an adult already, resigning from the ICS. The next possible very important decision was joining the independence movement under Gandhi and under C.R. Das. Then building up the youth movement in Congress. Eventually becoming Congress president in 1938. You might say running against Gandhi's support for a second term was a momentous decision. And finally, to decide to resign as Congress president was two. Setting up a leftist bloc within Congress, the Forward Bloc, was the next, I think, important political decision has taken. If we think of the times we are talking about, also in India, it was in a partly crucial situation, and the freedom fighters were partly in a very difficult situation, many of them being jailed. So another important decision on his part was to decide to go on hunger strike, get out of jail, and as a consequence, this enabled him to escape from the home of his parents, where he was home interned at the time. He undertook an important decision by doing that, because he decided that if he stayed in India and stayed in jail, he would not be able to do anything for his country's independence. He felt it was necessary to go abroad, but that also was not very easy. So, in disguise, he decided to go abroad, go west rather than east, where everybody might have expected it. And he escaped to Kabul, and from Kabul via Moscow to Berlin. And that situation was also a very complicated one at the time, given the political situation of the countries concerned. When he was in Germany, he decided and got the support of the German government to set up an Indian Legion. You might say that was the first Indian army which he set up abroad. And as the fortunes of war changed at the time, it was not possible for this part of the Indian army to move into India. And so eventually he decided on a very adventurous journey again, that is to escape to the Far East by submarine, which during a war situation was dangerous, and going in a submarine for a civilian is certainly also not an easy decision. When he finally moved to the Far East, he took over command of the INA, which already had been established there by Raj Bihari Bose and others before that. Another important decision in his life and event was seeking the support of Japan for the independence struggle, and the Japanese luckily were willing to grant that support to India. The Indian National Army had existed, but it needed building up, and so building up the Indian National Army, including a women's corps, the Rani of Jhansi corps, which was headed by Lakshmi Swaminathan Sehgal. Subhashini Sehgal just addressed you on the issue, I'm sure. And at that time, this was, I think, the first women's corps in an army. So it was also a reflection of Netaji's attitude that men and women should have equal rights, but also equal duties. The next step that you might quote as an important one, an important decision, was the proclamation of the Provisional Government of Free India in Singapore. Then the decision to march onto Indian soil to try to attack from that front and carry the war into India from that side in 1944. As you probably all know, the Indian Army did get to Imphal and Kohima in the northeast provinces, but not further, because the early monsoon forced them to retreat at the time. When Japan was more or less defeated, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki took place beginning of August 1945. That also ended the support for the Indian army, because Japan was no longer able to grant that. The next important decision that you might say Netaji had to take was whether to stay and go underground or to escape, and he tried to escape. And on his escape, on his way to Tokyo, he died as a consequence of a plane crash in Taipei. Well, I would add one more important aspect, which is actually beyond Netaji's life. And that is a Red Fort trial, about which I'm sure you have heard from Subhashini. The Red Fort trial in so far was very important as a consequence of Netaji's decisions, because it ultimately carried forth the struggle for independence into an information struggle for independence. I think the British did not expect at the time that putting 3 traitors on trial would have this effect, because they expected the Indians to view these 3 officers in lieu of other soldiers as traitors to emperor and the British Raj. But in fact, the opposite happened. The Indians saw this as a renewal of their struggle for independence. And it was, in fact, a renewal of the enthusiasm about the struggle for independence. And what was most important, probably on a practical basis, was the fact that not only the Indian civilian public was interested in the struggle of the Indian National Army, which of course in those days had not been known because there were no social media to say, which would sort of bring live pictures of events happening all the time. So it was a renewed exposition to a struggle which had happened somewhere else, which had been hardly known to India at all. But what was most important, I think, was the effect on the military, because the military all of a sudden saw there was an alternative to working in the British Indian Army for the British to suppress their own country. And the mutiny that came about in the armed forces led to a situation where Britain no longer was able to hold on to India. And of course, we may ask ourselves what causes a certain event. And the event was the independence of India. And of course, it would be sort of simple-minded to say it was a single event. In fact, the independence struggle was an ongoing struggle, which had, you might say, started in 1857 with the Sepoy rebellion. And as the 19th century came to a conclusion and the 20th century started, there was a whole movement within India in many different ways. It was not only political, it was also religiously and culturally speaking. And there was a revival of this self-interest and pride, which sort of created the basis for the independence struggle. And you might say this arrival of Gandhi, it was put on a national scale, and he was sort of the leader figure who had this popular appeal to bring people together. But many, many different steps were needed to bring about the ultimate result. For a long time, it was popular to say it was only the non-violence movement that was sort of the stance of the early Indian government of Free India. But I think, as we know from documents which have been declassified since a long time, that certainly the Red Fort trials and the aftermath, the effect on the military, had a very decisive effect for India's independence, because it created a situation where Britain no longer could hold on to control India, because the British Indian Army had been the tool sort of to control India, and they could no longer depend on that. And in fact, the importance of this event was also confirmed by the former ex-viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, in a conversation with one of my cousins, who had asked him what was the main reason why India became independent. And he said, well, you should know it was your uncle's and your father's effort in that matter. And so I think we have to really see life in a more complex manner. It was a whole development that led to that, but certainly the INA had a very important role to play, even though, strangely enough, after their defeat, they had this major effect on the Indian government. So what brings about such a thing? Netaji, of course, was a student of your school. So I think it definitely would interest you. How did this person develop? What kind of boy was he when he was in your school? And what brought about the effects that we had later on? What made him a great man to be a leader of people in an independence struggle? So I've decided to quote to you some of his own words. He has written an autobiography called An Indian Pilgrim, and I want to read to you some of the passages which he has written, partly about the Ravenshaw school and partly also about that whole period in his life. In January 1909, when I joined the Ravenshaw Collegiate School, Cuttack, a sudden change came over me. Among European and Anglo-Indian boys, he had been to an English school before that, my parentage had counted for nothing, but among our own people it was different. Further, my knowledge of English was above the ordinary level, and that gave me an added estimation in the eyes of my new classmates. Even the teachers treated me with undue consideration because they expected me to stand first and in an Indian school studies and not sports brought credit and reward. At the first quarterly examination, I did justify the hopes placed in me. The new atmosphere in which I lived and moved forced me to think better of myself. That is, I was worth something and was not an insignificant creature. Like many young boys at that age, he too doubted his own worth and his own position. And so gaining importance was certainly a beneficial effect for him. But changing from an English school to a Bengali school, Bengali speaking school, was certainly not that easy. I had read hardly a word in Bengali, my mother tongue, before I joined this school, while the other boys had already reached a high standard. I remember that the first day I had to write an essay on cow, or was it horse, I was made the laughing stock of all my classmates. I knew nothing of grammar and precious little of spelling, and when the teacher read out my composition to the whole class with running comments, punctuated with laughter, flowing in from all sides, I felt tumbled to the dust. Now, of course, those of you who are teachers today, and I myself used to be a teacher, teaching at university, we know that nowadays we would not treat young people like that. We would not make them the laughing stock of their fellow students. But at that time, matters were a bit different. Sorry, I forgot. However acute the mental torture, there was nothing I could do but put up with the humiliation and secretly resolve to make good. Slowly and steadily, I began to gain ground, and at the annual examination, I had the satisfaction of getting the highest marks in the subject. So Netaji was always a very good student, and he was always very good at taking exams. Another very important influence for his further life, I think, was created by the whole situation in Cuttack, not only by the school, but also by the environment in which his family lived. Among the teachers and students, there were both Bengalis and Orias, and the relation between them were quite cordial. One did not hear in those days, at least we students did not hear of any ill feelings or misunderstandings between the people of the two sister provinces. So far as members of our family were concerned, we could never think or feel in terms of narrow parochialism or provincialism. For that, we have to thank our parents. But as far as the school itself was concerned, we have to also see that one important factor is a school is not just rooms and tables and blackboards. It is essentially, and that is the most essential part, it's the people who are there, the teachers. And that certainly was the case for Subhash Chandra Bose. Of the teachers, there was one who left a permanent impression on my youthful mind. That was our headmaster, Babu Beni Madhav Das. The very first day I saw him taking the rounds, and I was then just over 12, I felt that I should now call an irresistible moral appeal in his personality. Up till then, I had never experienced what it was to respect a man. But for me, to see Beni Madhav Das was to adore him. I was not old enough then to realize what it was to adore. I could only feel that here was a man who was not an ordinary teacher, who stood apart from and above the rest of his tribe. And I secretly said to myself that if I wanted an ideal for my life, it should be to emulate him. Of course, this is a reaction of a student which would make any of us teachers proud. I think those of you who have been taught for many years, and I have taught for many years, it was always very gratifying to see one of the students to be successful and to also remember that maybe his own alma mater or her own alma mater had a role to play in that success. So I began to long for the day when I would reach the second class. That is when Das would be teaching the students and be entitled to listen to his lectures. That day did arrive, but my good fortune did not last long. After a few months, orders for his transfer came. This was, I believe, the first time in my life that I had to weep at the time of parting, and the first time I realized that only when we are forced to part do we discover how much we love. It was now a different school altogether, so dull, uninteresting, and uninspiring, for a light that had hitherto shone had vanished. Of course, Subhash Chandra Bose was a young boy at the time. He was an adolescent, was in puberty, and with all the difficulties that we experienced during that age, he also suffered a lot. And he says, I was at this time entering one of the stormiest periods in my psychical life, which was to last for 5 or 6 years. It was a period of acute mental conflict causing untold suffering and agony, which could not be shared. So I think those of us who have teenage children or remember their own teens will agree that this can be a very difficult time. But of course, I mentioned before that this whole period was a period of revivalism in many ways in India. And of course, one of the areas of revivalism was also the religious renewal in a way. And Netaji was very strongly influenced by Vivekananda, and he was exposed to that influence at that time when he was a student at Ravenshaw. I was barely 15 when Vivekananda entered my life. Then there followed a revolution within, and everything was turned upside down. It was, of course, a long time before I could appreciate the full significance of his teaching or the greatness of his personality, but certainly impressions were stamped indelibly on my mind from the outset. And of course, how do you deal with a religious situation of that type? So Netaji tried to get others interested in Vivekananda together, and I was soon able to get together a group of friends who became interested in Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. And as we know, uh, Vivekananda and Ramakrishna continued to play an important role in his life. But of course, I'm quite sure that, and you can imagine that the environment was not altogether happy with the development and with the behavior of the boys at that time. I was lucky, however, that the environment in which I grew up was, on the whole, conducive to the broadening of my mind. In my infancy, I was brought in touch with English people, English education, and English culture. After that, I went back to our own culture, both classical and modern. And even while I was at school, I had interprovincial contacts and friendships which I would have been deprived of if I had been living in Bengal. And friction or conflict between Hindus and Muslims were unknown in my early days. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore, but let us hope it might become better again. Looking back on my school days, I have no doubt that I must have appeared to others a wayward, eccentric, and obstinate. I was expected to do well at the matriculation examination and raise the prestige of the school, and great must have been the disappointment of my teachers when they found me neglecting my studies and running after ash-laden sadhus. What my parents must have thought and felt over a promising boy going off his head can best be imagined. I sat for the matriculation examination in March 1913 and came out second in the whole university. My parents were delighted, and I was packed off to Kolkata. So that was a sketch of Netaji's own ideas at that age and the influences that were prevailing at the time. I have to thank you for asking me to address you on this occasion. And sorry. Sorry. When we think back as grown-ups on what influenced us, then I think we all find that a school and of course other influences in early life, particularly the family, are of major interest. And so certainly Ravenshaw Collegiate School was a very important influence on Netaji for his future life. We don't know, of course, to what extent specific events contribute to specific outcomes, but certainly I think we might say that he would not have been the person that he became if he hadn't been exposed to these influences during his time at Ravenshaw and in Cuttack as a teenager. I'm very glad that his former alma mater continues to remember him and to also expose their students today to the history of this man. Of course, many events have taken place, and I think it becomes increasingly difficult for us to sort of put things into their historic perspective, because we view them from our own point of view, our own situation. And of course, there are many people in India and also in the Far East and in Japan and other countries who do remember my father in a very positive sense. And what always puzzles me the most is that not only as a historic figure who did this or that, but in a very emotional way. You might say Indians are emotional, that's true, but I think it is unusually emotional the way they look upon him and other freedom fighters too. And it is amazing that after 80 years, more than 80 years after his death, that this continues to be so. Of course, there are also others who are critical of him. And of course, different facts may be interpreted in different manners. You may have heard about some of the events in Bengal, where some people were charged with abusing my father as being a war criminal and the like. But I think the overwhelming part, I think, has viewed his contribution to India in a very positive way, and are in essence grateful to him as they are grateful to the other freedom fighters you have sacrificed for India. For the students today, I hope that they can learn something from their school and also from other people who might be examples for them, be it in the religious or in the political field, that certain values and certain virtues are to be considered a positive effect. That even if we cannot be great people and do great things which are known to everyone, I think in a small way we can all contribute to a better world. And I would hope that the students of Ravenshaw today, or also the alumni who are still in an active life, will keep that in mind and will live up to these standards. Thank you for having me as a speaker. Jai Hind to all of you.
Thank you, Madam. Jai Hind. Grateful for your very emotional and very insightful address and memorial lecture. You have not just been a professor of economics, you have been a philosopher. And
my father was a philosopher to a degree, not only a politician.
All right, ma'am.
And my son, one of my sons has studied philosophy.
We are able to see a part of their philosophy in you. And you are right, madam. School or any educational institution is not just a brick and mortar building. It is a place where the character is built by the sweat and life of the teachers and professors. And there cannot be a better example for us than Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Beni Madhav Das, and Netaji's daughter, Professor Anita Bose.
Thank you.
And you are not just a professor of economics or a philosopher. By virtue of being the daughter of Netaji, the Supreme Commander of Indian National Army and the head of Azad Hind, you have been the chronicler of the most critical part of world and India's history. And you have mentioned about school life and childhood and boyhood of young Subhash in his school and at Cuttack. Yes, madam, now the modern science also validates our traditional wisdom that the later stage leadership personality traits, in fact, develops at the early childhood. And no wonder Netaji's parents, teachers, and friends were superhuman beings to have created a unique personality that is Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. He has been unique in all respect, though the generations of alumni of our schools identify with him with all his conflicts and trivialities, we identify with him. And we aspire to inculcate some of his character and personality among ourselves, particularly the sense of inclusiveness, the sense of justice, the sense of fairness, and the courage and confidence. And regarding the unfortunate incidents in Bengal and various other parts of the country, no one in the world or no one in any part of India can take out that heritage, that very strong heritage and history of INA's martyrs, Netaji's sacrifice. Let me quote Allama Iqbal. It's a Urdu couplet. Let me quote. Allama Iqbal wrote it long back during pre-independence. मिट गए मिस्र, यूना और रोमा, लेकिन कायम है अब तक नामो निशान हमारा. कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी, सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौर जमा हमारा. It underscores the importance of our long and very deep heritage of equality, humanism, and inclusiveness, and it also gives a hope that no one can erase this spirit from India. No one can erase this spirit from Indians. Ma'am, by virtue of daughters of Netaji, you are indeed daughter of Cuttack, Odisha, and India. We invite you to visit your ancestral home and your father's alma mater, Ravinsha Collegiate School and Stuart School at Cuttack, during the next Parakram Divas, that is on 23rd of January 2027, and or during the next Sahid Martyrdom Day of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose on 18th of August 2027. Ma'am, with this, I would like to take your permission to show you how unique was Netaji's relationship with Mahatma Gandhi. We know about it, everybody knows about it, but you see the generosity of Netaji, despite all adverse situations. From the war field in the Second World War, when he was waging war against the British, he seeks blessings of Mahatma. And that part has been well documented in the Constitution of India, madam. This is the original calligraphic Constitution of India. And at part 19, Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, gives a salute to the then tricolor, then national flag of INA Azad Hind, and seeks blessings from the Mahatma to win the war against the British, to drive the British away from the motherland. It is well documented. And no wonder. You mentioned about Winston Churchill. Now the history is being rewritten. It is indeed the INA martyr sacrifice, courage, and contribution. It is indeed INA trial which united the Muslim League and the Congress, the Hindus, Sikh, and Muslims, and British had to prepone their exit from India. It is well documented, ma'am. With this, ma'am, we would like to go to the concluding part. If you feel comfortable, we would request some of our students and teachers to interact with you. Or if you wish, we could conclude the session now and collect the questions. We will pass it on to you. You will be able to respond it and we'll share it among our students. It is up to you, madam. Now it's, if
I
you
can take a few questions if my voice conks out. Or if I get too tired, then I will take you up on the second alternative, and you can collect the rest of the questions and send them to me.
Thank you, madam.
But
Thank you.
let's take a few questions now.
Thank you, madam. Now,
Thank you for your effort.
Thank you, madam. So kind of you. And now, may we request our host to allow to unmute everybody, both audio and video, and allow few of our students, particularly those who are in the NCC uniform, Scout and Guide uniform, to interact with Professor Madam Anita Bose. Please keep them on mute. And the students may please introduce yourself and interact with our chief guest. Students may please go ahead now. Teachers also may please go ahead now. Madam, hopefully our students are not been able to unmute themselves. May I ask on their behalf? May I ask?
Good evening, sir. Can I ask a question?
Please go ahead. Most welcome. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself first.
Ma'am, I am Vidyashree Mahapatra from Stuart School, Cuttack. I am from class 11.
Please unmute your video.
My video is unmute, sir.
All right. Please go ahead.
Ma'am, being daughter of Subhash Chandra Bose, it's a very a lucky thing for you. I want to ask you, ma'am, specifically that what all hardships Netaji had when he was in Vienna and he met your mother. At that time, your mother was also one of the most was a autographer and an reporter, if I believe. And how was at that time the consequences and the thing that was happening in Vienna?
Can you please repeat and speak a little louder, because I'm old. I'm getting to be deaf. I'm just in the process of getting a hearing aid, but I don't have it yet. So,
ma'am, I am repeating my question. I am repeating the question. Your father and your mother, they both met each other in Vienna. And how do you
yes.
think your father's vision for a free, united, and secular India can be best be applied to modern day socio-economic challenges? And how do you believe? What was his view?
I hope I did understand you correctly. Yes, my parents met in Vienna, and they met on the occasion of my father writing a book about India's independence struggle. he had been released from jail because of he had come to Europe because of his poor health. It was unclear what he was suffering of. It turned out that he was suffering of a gallbladder stone, which at that time, uh, even today, is an unpleasant thing, but today it's not a dangerous operation. And during his stay there, he got a contract to write this book, and he was looking for a secretary. And my mother applied for the job, and he employed her as a secretary. And she had always been very enthusiastic about India in particular, because she had also um, met some other Indian families and students there. And so this is how they came to meet each other. Um,
And
in a way,
maybe
I think it was
father's
most
vision.
surprising that they fell in love with each other. For each one, it was sort of unlikely to happen. And it was certainly not an easy relationship. And particularly for my mother, ex post facto, I would say it was very difficult for him too, because I think he had never taken into account that he might commit himself to or might get involved with any woman, because he was committed to his country, and that was number one, number two, number three, and that was it. So she shared his enthusiasm on that, but unfortunately, she also never came to set foot into free India.
And ma'am, what do you believe? What was some lesson on fact about Subhash Chandra Bose, sir, which we don't know? Most of the Indians don't know.
Well, I answered that in a maybe very short and unusual fashion. Then my mother used to tell me that your father was a great man, an important man, but don't get any ideas that this makes you important in any way. If anything, it gives you a commitment to work harder.
Okay. And how can you best say about your father's vision being applied for a free, united, and secular India? What was his vision and how it is with the today's, what the reality is?
I think you better write your questions, because with
Yeah.
the phone, with the loudspeaker of the computer, I just can't hear you that well.
Yes, ma'am, we will give opportunity to other students as well. One or two more. Any students or teachers would like to interact with our chief guest, please. Please introduce yourself, unmute both audio and video. Introduce yourself and ask your question. Please go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. I am Jayaditya, a student studying in 9th grade of Stewart School. And ma'am, my question to you was that, according to your point of view, at the grassroots level in today's generation, what are we lacking, which is something that we definitely should improve?
Please repeat again
You see,
loudly.
compared to attendance, it seems that what you're dealing with today is rather trite. I mean, there are difficulties. You all have to deal with the same situation in some ways, but there's nothing that, you see, at that time, partly there was a heroic ethic was important, and which could be followed. You see, you probably today think of, I have to finish my school, I have to finish my education, I should get a proper job and to support myself and do something constructive and useful. If you look at the top level freedom fighters of those days, they partly led a different life, because what you would expect as a normal life was not possible to carry out with the commitment they had to a cause, be that Gandhi or be that Netaji or any of the other great leaders, because you can't very easily sort of work for your own living and at the same time spend 150% to fight for a cause. So today you will have another challenge, and partly the challenge that you might have outside your own career, but say looking for a cause may seem sort of small or unimportant. Of course, in other ways, you might say it's as important as ever. If you look at the environment and look at the global warming of the world, and the question of are we going to reach a point where this might just turn our world to be uninhabitable? That's also a big challenge, but partly it's a challenge which to some extent seems to be vague, and we can't really do anything alone. So you certainly should look at the challenges of today. But even if one challenge, say, is too big to say I can do something for that, you can make small contributions to that, be that to your society or be that to the society of the world. I mean, many of the Indians, young Indians, go abroad and are very successful there. And India is, of course, one of the countries with a very large young population, whereas if you look at the world around, you have many countries, for example, United States and some others, where you have an aging population, and some of the Indians have gone there and been very successful in their work. In fact, Indians abroad are the most successful ethnical group, for example, in the United States and also in other places, partly because India has a good education and plays great emphasis on education. And the quotes I read to you from Netaji's book also indicated that for the Indian society, education was important, not football or baseball or cricket. India has a great potential in intellectual terms, particularly because education is important there. And I think do the best that you can in your work, but don't forget that you are a human being in society and that you also want to lead a positive life in that sense. Being successful in school or even making a lot of money is not the only thing that should count.
Thank you very much, madam. In fact, you have told us the spirit of Netaji in your last, in the answer to this last question, ma'am. But I have been requested by a jurist friend of ours to put this question and an appeal before you. May I ask and submit that appeal?
Yeah.
The appeal is like this, ma'am. Recently, the Honorable Supreme Court of India has admitted your petition to bring back Netaji's mortal remains from Renkoji Temple in Tokyo and to perform the last rite with state honor. In fact, we are interested to support you in your cause and to be a party along with you before the Supreme Court as an intervener. But I understood, my jurist friend understood, that it is not possible because the Supreme Court has already given a partial verdict in this case, that you alone, being the daughter of Netaji, you alone can apply this. So perhaps we will not be able to be officially, legally an intervener in support of your claim before the Honorable Supreme Court. Tell us, what can we do? Please guide us and tell us what can we do in support of your demand?
First of all, I appreciate your support very much. It seems legally impossible that you can sort of get involved in the legal proceedings. But in fact, one of my nephews had petitioned the Supreme Court before, and they had said no, the daughter should do it herself. And so I did that myself. I don't know what the outcome will be. The government will have to make a statement, and I think while in September, supposedly the next court hearing will take place. Maybe it will be postponed if the government needs more time or if the court has other plannings. So we'll have to see what the government has to say. At this stage, I think we can't do very much. I think you certainly could get involved once a decision is taken one way or the other, because then the question will arise, what should be done? How should it be done if the remains can be brought back to India? What happens if the government will do it? What happens if they say you can do it yourself? We don't really want to be involved. Of course, there's one aspect. If I had to do it myself, there would still be a question of security, because unless I were to bring the remains in secret, there may be a great gathering or so. And in any great gathering, if it's not organized, you can have a lot of danger. Some people can get killed, and one certainly wouldn't want something like that to happen. So that would have to be decided. Or if the government, for some reason or other, decides that they will neither allow the remains to be brought, nor would they do it themselves, then the question may arise, is it most likely the best thing to keep the remains in Japan, where they have been honored for 80 years? And even though the Japanese government had very little understanding in the past that India did not want to bring back the remains of their national leader, but I think we'll have to now wait and see till this court situation is decided. I think any action in between probably might be of harm, because I understand the Supreme Court is not very keen on having either party intervene. They might consider that sort of an undue That's why I also have not made any press statements this year, which I've done the last few years on the occasion of my father's death anniversary and his birth anniversary.
Yes, ma'am. In either of the situation, we will continue to pay our grateful tributes to Netaji from here every year on his birth and martyrdom day. And moreover, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is not just a leader from India, he's a world leader, undoubtedly. And we will conclude the session, ma'am, now, with your permission. I would request all our participants to be ready on the conclusion to give as a grateful tributes to Netaji and INA martyrs, as well as a vote of thanks to our chief guest. All of us will give a greetings loudly together as Jai Hind. But that is at the conclusion of the session. Be ready. I am requesting all our hosts, co-hosts, to keep everybody on mute. Please be ready. In the meantime, ma'am, let me recite a stanza of a very insightful poetry by Hindi poetry by Sri Jagdamba Prasad Mishra, Hitaisi. The meaning of this stanza is, every year there will be a mela, there will be a fair, there will be a celebration celebrating the martyrdom of martyrs. And he writes in Hindi, शहीदों की चिताओं पर जुड़ेंगे हर बरस मेले, वतन पर मरने वालों का यही बाकी निशान होगा. In fact, today we have celebrated Netaji's Martyrdom Day, and now we will pay grateful tributes, and we will propose a vote of thanks by saying, I'll say 1, 2, 3. All of us will join and say Jai Hind. Please unmute yourself. All our participants, please unmute yourself, both audio and video. And when I say 1, 2, 3, after a pause, say Jai Hind. Let us start now. 1, 2, 3. Jai Hind. Grateful, madam. Thank you very much. We stop here. We are really grateful to you. Now the host may end the meeting.
Recording
Thank
stopped.
you all. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.